Good evening, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. What I'm going to do right now is to give you an overview of what we're going to discuss. The overall budget that's presented to you by the Board of Finance. I'll talk about that. Talk about the key revenue assumptions that are built into the budget. And we'll talk about the general government. I'm going to turn it over to the Board of Education, Gloria Dennis, to talk about Board of Ed, and then there'll be an opportunity for citizen and resident feedback. All right? So, you're going to see a lot of slides and numbers and charts and information, but here's a 30-second soundbite. If you don't take anything away from here, keep this in mind. The budget that we are proposing is almost $94 million, $93.9 million. It's a 2.7 increase from the year before. Mill rate at 33.93, that's from the year before. 0 mill increase. 2 years in a row. So that's a 30-second soundbite. And I'll move on to the rest of the slides with that.
Just want to give you a sense of, what you're voting on. There are two components in here, the Board of Education budget and the general government. And there are shared services that we have outlined here that both the town and the Board of Ed share. And it's about a $9.3 million nut, and about half of it roughly for the Board of Ed. For the benefit of those who can't see the screen, it's things like electricity, liability insurance, workers' comp, facilities and grounds maintenance done by a central budget, and all the school nurses, the crossing guards, school security guards, SROs, all debt is in the shared services budget, capital, and financial audit. So those are the components of the shared budget. What I'm going to do now is to give you a sense of what was submitted to the Board of Finance, and then the adjustments that were made by the Board of Finance to bring it to the budget that is in front of you. The initial budget was about $98 million combined from the town and the Board of Ed, and the following adjustments were made to bring it down to 94. Health insurance, at that time we presented the budget to the Board of Finance. We didn't have the final numbers, and we assumed about a 10% increase, and the number has come in lower. Hence, we have reduced it by $426,000 and change. There's a reduction of the Board of Ed budget, $304,000. The defined benefit pension plan we had included in the initial submission to be paid from our savings or the fund balance, and that was removed. And the intent is to pay it when retirements pop up. Capital budget was around 1.5, and it has been reduced by $1,143,000. The remainder I will discuss when I get to the capital. And there was an amount set aside for charter revision, unlikely it's going to happen, that has been removed. And we have added about $25,000 for the fire department for rescue tools. That brings the budget to the 93.9 that you have seen. In addition to that, there were a couple of revenue items that were incorporated to make this happen. One is the American Rescue Plan Act that was just passed by Congress, and that was about every town will be getting over a certain amount of money, and Berlin will be receiving close to $1 million, and we believe we can count about $700,000 of that towards this year's budget. In addition, the Berlin High School construction project is nearing completion. We are planning to get the high school ductwork done by the summer, and that will leave about $1.2 million remaining, estimated. And that will be used as a revenue offset for the fiscal 22 budget. I want to give you a sense of where things come from. quickly what the grand list is. Property tax is the largest component, and then the two projects that I talked about, and then also talk about expenditures, operating cost, capital, and then the obligations that we have in terms of debt. Okay? So the grand list, it's the measure of the local economy. It is all the real estate, residential, commercial, motor vehicles that are registered in town. The good news, today's grand list that we are using is about year, last year's 2020 was $2.37 billion, about 1.4% increase from the year before. That generates approximately $1.1 million in revenues to the current year's budget that we are proposing. As I mentioned, that's the largest component of our revenue. Around 86% of that entire town budget is from taxes. And the other components, the larger ones, I won't go through all of the smaller ones, but we have made an assumption here that we would collect 99.3% of that, which is pretty good, consistent with past practice. And the 1.2 million I mentioned that we will be, when we close out the Berlin High School, that is part of the revenue component. Federal grants, the $700,000 from the rescue plan. Education cost sharing grant will remain the same for next year, and you will hear more about that during the Board of Ed presentation. And fees, such as building, town clerk, all of the fees that we collect for services. Permitting fees, we are projecting somewhat of an increase. And of course, golf ordinance requires us to manage our expenses, match our expenses to revenues, and we are anticipating some increase in revenues there. Unfortunately, the interest that we earn on our short-term cash, all of you have experienced that, is somewhat low. We have reduced the expectation for that. And consistent with what the VNA, the Visiting Nursing Association, has earned during the last couple of years, we've seen a downward trend, and we have adjusted the revenue projection to match that. That's where the money comes from. Where does it go? So in the blue, you see the Board of Education, 56.1%. This includes, remember the shared services that I talked about, 5 million or so. Including that, it's about 56.1. Public safety is police, fire, ambulance, fire marshal, animal control, things that we spend to keep this community safe. Okay? Debt service, that's 10% of our annual budget. And these are obligations that were issued years ago, including for school buildings, Pistol Creek, athletic fields, roads and bridges. And that number has been going down. There's a separate slide on the obligations. I will give you a little bit more detail on that. 9.6 for physical services. This is highway, public works, facilities, parks and grounds, garage, to service the vehicles, equipment, plow the roads, remove the trash, do all those services that we provide to our residents. Park, rec, and library self-explanatory. We have the community center as part of that as well. General government is folks like the assessor, revenue collector, town clerk, finance office, myself. The town manager's office is included in that. Health and Human Services, about 2%. That's the VNA, social services, senior center. And then community development is a small amount of economic development that we invest, and building and town planner. Townwide shared costs that we have it in one budget for the town. So general government, I want to talk briefly about our strategy. This has been consistent for the last few years. What we think that is important for a town, especially for Berlin. Education is one that is very high there, and it's reflected in the allocation that you see. Public safety, another one. Infrastructure, roads, bridges, buildings, everything that the physical assets that we have to manage that. And financial strength. It is something that is really important and something that we take real pride in. We try to plan for all of the services and activities for the town and make sure that they are covered with sufficient revenues and we don't run any deficits. In addition to that, we make sure that before we spend a single dollar, we have reserves set aside and money set aside for our obligations and our debt. It is important that we maintain the town's AAA bond rating from Standard & Poor's. And you might not know this, 34 years in a row, the Government Financial Officers Association has given an award to the town of Berlin for financial reporting excellence. So we are in good standing and we would like to keep it that way. Priorities for this year, 3 broad categories. We'll talk about infrastructure. With infrastructure, we are doing some HVAC upgrades in the McGee Middle School, some what I call rooftop units. And then athletic fields related to some of the funds that we got appropriated with the bonds, doing a synthetic field hopefully next year at the Berlin High School. Things such as Percival Field, and some work will be done in Sage as well. In terms of roads, the biggest improvement you're going to see is Porter's Pass, Christian Lane, and Deming Road. That whole road will be redone brand new. That's going to happen this summer. In terms of bridges, we're going to replace the Kingston Road Bridge. That'll be a bridge replacement. There will be some bridge rehabs with Glen Street, with Heritage Drive and Worthington Ridge. So those are things that we're going to do with infrastructure. Under education, fire alarms at Willard will be replaced. Funding's been set aside for that. There's some monies allocated for vans, a couple of them, and ADA upgrades throughout the school district. Economic development, 2 major projects are underway, and the third one is right behind. One being the Steel Center that will have about 19,000 square feet of commercial space and about 76 apartments. And the Berlin Turnpike, called the Turnpike Ridge Project, about another 18,000 square feet of commercial space and about 72 apartments. Those are important initiatives for the town, and there's another one that's also coming south of the pump station where Blue Lab stays that will happen probably the year after. I want to talk very briefly about the drivers of the general government expense, which is an increase of $1.3 million that we are asking for. In that is a $200,000 contingency that will not affect the mill rate. That'll be coming from the reserves or the fund balance. And it is critical, we believe, that we have a contingency in place for any unplanned items. Spending from the contingency still requires that we go through the council and the Board of Finance, but it avoids having to have a town meeting to have a special appropriation. So we have requested $200,000, and that's in the budget as well. Overall, employee-related costs are going up only 1.2%, $447,000 related to employee costs, both personnel and benefits, including health insurance. As you can see, health insurance is $194. And with new positions, I want to talk a little bit about that. This year, when we started the budget process, we told all department heads, recognizing what businesses and residents were going through in anticipation of the challenges they might face, not to request anything, any new positions or any new requests, unless they felt that the services were going to get compromised. Second one we asked people to do was to try and see if we could eliminate certain positions at least, and also keep some positions open if possible for a year, try to minimize the impact on the budget. And the third one, we want to think broadly about opportunities to invest in the town in terms of economic development and perhaps bring more businesses to town, the solution being not to increase taxes, but to have more taxpayers here, okay? So with that, one position that we're adding is in the building department. I think it's absolutely critical that we get the word out. We have gathered some momentum in terms of customer service and letting people know that this is a business-friendly town. We are here to serve. We are efficient. We're going to turn things around quickly. With all of the projects that are coming along, maintaining the existing businesses and to support the residents, we need this position. And it's a temporary full-time position. It will go away in 2 to 3 years when the projects are done. Other part-time 10, 12 hours are to support Parks and Rec, town planner, economic development area, and for a leave of absence for an animal control and an HR function. All right? But the net increase that we have in existing wages is 114 because we have reduced certain positions too. 2 full-time positions in the VNA, 1 we are holding in the town planner's office, and then another part-time in the VNA as well to get to that net increase of 0.67% increase in existing wages, all right? The other costs are anticipated increase in electricity. We built into the budget based on pricing and consumption. We're doing other initiatives. We'll launch more initiatives during the year to try and reduce that number. Refuse, garbage removal, recycling costs are going up. We have put that in the budget. And some small increases for, legal-related expenses have been going up lately, tax refunds, operating materials, related to Timberland and other departments in public works in the garage, and also some money to promote Berlin, to advertise, market, and get the word out there and get more businesses in here. Some small amount for equipment and also school security guards. What I mentioned about the capital, we have a $370,000 set aside. I talked about some of these, the fire alarm, 2 school vans, mobile data terminals for the PD, and also ADA. Those are the exact amounts of the $370 that we will be investing. I want to give you a quick snapshot of our obligations, and this is a good story to tell here. 2017, we had over $115 million in our obligations. It's down to 89.6. For the first time in many years, it's below our operating budget level, which is a good story. It's 95% of our budget. And we are not borrowing any new funds next year, not planning on right now. And then it lowers the debt further by 8.9. And this is a trend we want to continue, try to lower that debt amount, pay our debt, only because we have almost 10% you saw on debt service, and if you can get that number to 5% range eventually, that'll be excellent. Pension. Nothing is complete without talking about the pension, and this is a closed-end plan, defined benefit plan that we have been reducing year over year as people leave the town, and in general, it's Moody's investors benchmark around 60% as a minimum funding level. We have been funding it around 28.3%, but we have enough sufficient fund balance when people leave that we have been paying them. Very quickly, to summarize, these are the initiatives that we are funding from the budget. Education, you'll hear more, improvement in our community services, and also community development, public safety, infrastructure, roads, bridges, and also ensuring that all our liabilities are paid. 33.93 mill rate, same as year before. I'm going to have one slide here on the Berlin water control, and that is a good story. It's pretty much essentially flat from last year to this year. Some reduction in expenses as a result of capital investments and lower investments, and also a slight increase in personnel, a net reduction of $12,000. As a planning tool, there are a few things that I need in capital for the Berlin water control. One is the Deming Road pump station, which needs to be replaced. It's a $2.5 million number, and we are planning to get about $1 million from the state in the form of a grant, and asking MDC to cover 60% of the cost. The Berlin Turnpike, we still need to find a way to fund this one eventually. These are the old pipes that needs to get replaced. They're in concrete. And then estimated around $2 million. And then it's not in this year's budget, obviously. And then East Berlin water line certain things need to get updated just because they're old. Next steps, after you hear the Board of Ed presentation, this is what it's going to look like. Today, hopefully, Board of Finance votes to recommend the Board of Education, the general government budget to the Town Council. Town Council meets on April 6th, and they have three options. They can, recommend the budget as is, or reduce the budget. In both cases, it goes to a referendum, and if the Board of Finance rejects the budget, the council rejects the budget, joint meeting will be required to decide on the budget. And then the budget referendum is scheduled for April 27th. With that, I am going to turn it over to Julia Dennis from the Board of Education, President. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. So I'm going to present the 2021-2022 Board of Education budget. I am Julia Dennis, the chair of the Board of Education. So I'm going to just start out with the superintendent's goals for 2021-2022 and just state that the Board of Education fully supports these goals as we move forward to continue to have an excellent school system, continue to provide quality education to all students at the standard that Berlin parents expect, maintain favorable class size and adequate course offerings, provide all students with an education that prepares them for multiple options and opportunities upon graduation, ensure that appropriate courses, structures, and staff are available for new graduation requirements, provide adequate safety measures, equipment, and systems that allow all students and staff a safe learning environment, and expand the Berlin Transition Academy in partnership with Cromwell Public Schools. The Board of Education's goals through this presentation is to effectively communicate the level of funding that's necessary to continue to provide a quality education that the students, parents, and community expect of our school system, to be transparent as well as fiscally responsible. We as Board of Education make a commitment to all the stakeholders in the community, especially the students and parents that chose to buy in this town or send their students to school in this town. The Board of Education approved budget. This slide right here shows you that we originally, we started at a 4.56% increase. Then we decreased slightly to 3.82% based on a reduction in benefits. And now after the $304,000 reduction from the Board of Finance, we're coming in at a 3.17% increase. So if you look at the second stacked bar graph, that is where we are after the Board of Finance reduction. And our contractual obligations are 2.71%. On top of contractual obligations, we only have an ask of 0.46%. That 0.46% is necessary so we can achieve the goals I just spoke about, make our schools competitive, and continue to provide the students with an education that they need, which includes school security, special education, social emotional learning, and the expansion of the Transition Academy. And again, just to reiterate on the point that families make a choice to send their kids to school in Berlin. So the 2021-2022 Board of Finance approved budget, we are 4.6% above contractual obligations with a total of 3.17%. The following places we cut are to fulfill the $304,000 reduction. We have $81,903 in certified salaries, new staff requests, $28,967 in contracted services, which are Zoom licenses, $123,000 in supplies, $50,000 in technology equipment, and $20,000 in capital improvement. So this right here is our summary sheet, which shows that, we are coming in at a $47,885, $632,000 budget. And like I previously stated initially, when the board approved this, we were at 4.56%, brought it down to 3.82%, and now this represents 3.17% that we are requesting. This sheet right here, this table, shows the line items that have increased or decreased. I'm going to just cover a few of them as I go through. I'm not going to get into specific detail about everything because I've done that twice already, once at a board meeting, another time at the Board of Finance, and so we're just going to move through and highlight certain areas. So one thing I just want to highlight on this slide right here is a 5-year comparison of teachers and certified staff for full-time employees. In 2016 to 2017, there were 279.39. This year, the 2020-2021, we are currently at 266.7. We're only adding one position in kindergarten because that's our most unpredictable age, especially this coming school year. So we've been adjusting this number based on need, eliminating classes that have low enrollment, focusing on adequate course offerings that allow students opportunities in class sizes that are favorable, all while being fiscally responsible as possible. This slide right here outlines the new staff requests for the 2021-2022 school year. So when the budget process first started, we had 21.5 total requests for new staff. This budget is representing only 4.9, which are being funded through open choice, so actually not even in our operational budget, and 16.6 requests were not funded. Our contracted services, I want to highlight this slide because it's important to show what the contracted services are. It includes all operational and educational systems which are necessary to run the school. And the Zoom licensing and software is $30,000, but we cannot reduce there because the governor said that distance learning is here to stay. The next slide outlines the transportation. Our contract with New Britain Transportation is 3% increase this year. Rather than asking for the 3% increase, we're only asking for 1.22% because we are able to cover 1.78% through excess cost grant. So this is another place where the Board of Education thought it was really important to highlight where we are being consciously fiscally responsible and transparent in trying to find ways to save. Our next slide outlines the tuition, and it's important to bring awareness to this line item because we have obligations to provide education to all of our students. We are also mandated by the state to provide the necessary education. Last month we had an expulsion, which was an unexpected expense for the board. We also have to pay for outplacements for special education. And, these educational institutions do have an increase in cost per year, and this is what it is for next year. So all other expenditures, this slide is showing that in 2020-2021, we requested $62,186. So at this point, we've already exceeded this amount. Therefore, on the summary sheet where you see 80.57%, we had to increase it because We've already exceeded it. This shows that we are not, we're over, we need the money, we need the funding, and the items that we need are not getting funded through the capital request. So we need these funds to do various tasks such as updating bathrooms, if something breaks, town maintenance, because not everything is in the capital plan. So the bullets on here would just be, restoration of the recess areas, routine painting, window repairs. I'm going to get into the ESSER and COVID relief grants because that's money that is coming in, but it's important to be specific about what we can and cannot spend the money on. So with the ESSER grant and COVID relief grant, this slide right here, it outlines the state and federal funding that we've received. ESSER 1 has been expended for. ESSER 2, the budget is getting put together now for allocation, and COVID relief, it's been expended for. And that, this is meant to be for learning loss, socialization, et cetera. So for the ESSER 1, this slide shows the breakdown. We received $144,775. 10,000 of that was reimbursed to St. Paul's School. So this slide just shows the breakdown of how the money was spent, because that has now been spent. This slide outlines how the money needs to be used and what it cannot be used on. This money cannot be used within the operational budget. We have very specific guidelines to follow. The ESSER 2, like I previously stated, we have very specific guidelines. The Board of Ed is currently working to allocate the funds. We had a meeting this morning in committee, and then it will go to the rest of the board, and it cannot be used to offset the operational budget. So the Hartford Open Choice Enrollment, this right here shows the allocation of the enrollment throughout the district. So it's really important to bring awareness that the purpose of this slide is to not put a dollar sign on students and children. The purpose is to show our good faith in creating a revenue stream to offset costs within the district, which do in fact impact everyone in town, such as the taxpayers. So this past summer, the Board of Ed was scrutinized by the community via social media, and we received, upwards of hundreds of emails about how we are not a diverse enough community, a diverse enough school. So every year that people go back and forth on choice, it comes back on the board, whatever your opinions may or may not be. However, it was made abundantly clear this summer to the entire board that people want a more diverse community. I know I cannot solve that problem with the housing market and deciding who comes to town. And the only way that we as a Board of Education can create more diverse schools is by opening up our open seats that are not being used to the Choice students who want to be in Berlin. Therefore, the partnership with Choice is mutually beneficial. We only add spots where there are empty seats in a class that will go unfilled. We are not adding teachers, and we also rely on this funding. With the Choice funding, these are our 4 potential alternatives. So those are there of how we will potentially spend the money that's not already allocated for next year's Choice. We have no other contingency plans, like I was already talking about with outplacements, anything that comes up. So last year, we had our Choice funds available. If we didn't have that, we never would have made it through this year. And that's just, it's just been clear. So that's on Hartford Choice. Now, the budget funding history. So this shows right here that we are still catching up. We have had 2 really good years that have helped us catch up. When we are consistently cut year over year, like you can see, previous to the past 2 years, playing catch-up won't allow our schools to be competitive. We'll just be playing catch-up. So we are very fortunate to have received the funding we did the past 2 budget years. The 5-year average, we were at the bottom, which I'll get to on the next slide, and now we're in the middle. And what we are doing with this budget is really trying to be as fiscally responsible, but just not be at the bottom of the pack. So this slide was what I was talking about. We're right in the middle, which is really important to continue to have a competitive program of studies and excellent schools. The Berlin state per pupil expenditure. So Berlin is in the red, state is in the blue. The gap is starting to close, and that's what we've been working on. We want to continue moving forward, not backward, because again, playing catch-up can be very detrimental to our school system. And the Board of Education percentage of the town budget compared to surrounding districts. This information came from various district and town websites, and it's sorted by greatest to least. So the next slide, I'll give you the breakdown. So the share of revenue sources, the Board of Education, we receive 50.74% of the town budget. And here, this shows that $46,416,000 of our 2020-2021 budget is that percentage, sorry, the 50.7%. So 5.8 million of that comes from educational cost sharing. So I know oftentimes it's said that we get a $46 million budget, or we had a $46 million budget this year, but 5.87 million comes from educational cost sharing from the state. And then this is the Board of Education operational funding sources. So out of the 2020-2021 operational budget, like previously stated, was at 46 million. 87.35% comes from the town. 12.65% comes from educational cost sharing. And we are back to the summary page of our $47,885,632 budget, which is a 3.17% increase. We originally, after the reduction in benefits, were at 3.82%. So we've been working really hard to make sure that we are presenting an accurate, fiscally responsible, and transparent budget.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Okay, now we'll open it up to citizens of audience. If anybody has any questions, comments. This will go fast.
Good evening, everyone. I just wanted to say a couple words. Appreciate everyone getting through the budget process. I know we all know it's not easy to do. I appreciate the town manager, town staff, Mr. Delaney, and everyone that has helped out, Board of Ed, obviously Superintendent, Julia. Appreciate all the hard work everybody puts in on this budget every year, time and time again. Board of Finance, obviously it's coming to the town council. Volunteers, all of us, you guys put in a lot of time on the budget. We appreciate that. It's been a difficult year, I think, with COVID and the pandemic and all that we've all been through. So I think this budget, from what I've seen so far, I know it's coming to the council next week. We'll look at it a little bit closer as we have a few days here before it gets to us. But it seems like a fair budget. I think, we still have, although Berlin has gotten through this pandemic, I think, relatively well compared to many places, many towns, many states. Connecticut has done fairly well. But we still have people that have suffered, that have lost jobs, that have lost loved ones, that have been ill with COVID, so I think people are still suffering, businesses are still hurting. The good thing I think I see in Berlin is that we're getting through it, and the economy in Berlin seems to be doing very well. We've had many small businesses open, which I think is one of the backbones of our town, and we've been very fortunate that the town staff, throughout COVID, even though Town Hall was closed, we kept everything moving forward. And we have some of our larger businesses expanding. Budney Aerospace, I think Tom's Corporation is another expansion. So we have other developments, obviously the train station, the Berlin Turnpike. So I think there's brighter days ahead for our economy in Berlin, and I think we're very fortunate where we are, and I think where we're headed. So I thank everybody for working hard and coming up with a fair budget, I believe, and we'll have some more to say next week. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Anybody else? Okay.
Anything online?
Anybody, any question, any statements online? Do we have anything? Mr. Delaney, do we? Oh, that's great. It's very good. So everybody's happy. Okay, then we'll move to adjourn. Can I have a motion?
Make a motion to adjourn the budget hearing.
Can I have a second? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you very much for coming. Call the order of the meeting. Discussion of department budgets. We have any discussion on our fiscal 2022 budget proposal? Anybody on the board that wants any discussion here? Are we all set? Okay, we're gonna vote.
Each one separately?
Yeah,
Okay. Well, I do have
go ahead,
a
Sal.
couple of comments. It's in particular to the Board of Education budget.
Go ahead.
I understand, we're going in with a zero tax increase, but from my perspective, if you look at the declining school enrollment for the Board of Education, and if you look at the upcoming year, you're talking about an 8% drop in enrollment. And the Board of Education did not make any budget reductions associated with that declining school enrollment. There's also, in my opinion, based on the analysis that I did, that there's a considerable built-in budget reserve within the current proposed budget. And thirdly, there should be no issue with meeting COVID restrictions because the Board of Education will get relief funds to meet those COVID restrictions. So in my opinion, a further reduction in the BOE budget will have no impact on the BOE meeting its requirements and goals. And that's why I'm voting no on the BOE budget.
Okay, thank you, Sal. Anybody else?
Yeah, I just want to basically agree with Sal. We're once again hitting the town side of the budget at 2.3%, and 3.2 on the Board of Education. And there's no adjustment for the drop. There's 223 student drop over the past 3 years, and at the same time, they got a 9.4% budget increase. I mean, that is just starting to get too far out of balance, and I think we should have probably aimed to get those numbers a little more in line with each other instead of having that much of a disparity between the town and the Board of Education budget. I would be a no vote on the Board of Education budget as well.
Okay, thank you, Tim. Okay, so let's move to send the budget to the town council. Jerry, can you read the motion for us?
Move to send the Board of Education budget of $47,885,632 to the town council.
Could I have a second? Second. Can I have a roll vote? Can you do that, Mr. Delaney? Individual, thank you.
Chairman Lamaglio,
Yes.
Mr. Paradis,
Yes.
Mr. Bordenaro,
No.
Mr. Hernandez,
Yes.
Mr. Grady,
No.
Mr. Holmes. That's 4 yes, 2 no.
Okay, thank you. Jerry?
I move to send the general government budget of $46,073,415 to the town council.
Can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, Mr. Delaney?
Chairman Lamaglio,
Yes.
Mr. Paradis,
Yes.
Mr. Bordenaro,
Yes.
Mr. Fernandez,
Yes.
Mr. Grady,
No.
Mr. Holmes. That's 5 yes, 1 no.
Okay, thank you very much. Can I have a move to adjourn?
Question?
Oh, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
Do we have to do the water control one? No?
No, you don't.
Thank you.
Okay, can I have a motion to adjourn?
Make a motion to adjourn. Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye, thank you. We're all set.